China confirmed today it now has 2 Canadians in custody. Michael Kovrig is a diplomat who's on leave to work with a non-governmental organization called the International Crisis Group. He was detained in Beijing on Monday. And Michael Spavor is a businessman whose company promotes tours to North Korea as well as investments there. He was also taken on Monday. Beijing denies holding them has anything to do with the arrest of Huawei executive in Vancouver earlier this month. The CBC's Catherine Cullen is following the story live from Ottawa. She joins me now. So, Catherine, what do we know right now about the status of these 2 Canadian men held in China?
Well, Andrew, the latest from the Canadian government is that they have not had contact with either of these 2 men, and there had been some confusion around that, but it seems that they have not had contact with them, obviously something Canadian officials are hoping for. And it was only overnight that Canadian officials actually confirmed that both men were being detained. It really has been a hallmark of this situation as it's evolved over the past couple of days, that there has been a lack of information given to Canadian officials, questions about where these men were precisely, their status, what exactly the nature of the allegations against them were. A lot of that has remained mysterious. We do have a bit more information from Chinese officials who say that the men are being detained on suspicion of endangering national security. They have declined to say whether either man has been provided with a lawyer, although Chinese officials do insist that their legal rights are being protected. But obviously, this is a source of great concern for Canadian officials. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say.
Obviously, we continue to engage with Chinese authorities. We will always be standing up for Canadians in difficult situations abroad. We're engaged in consular services with their families as well.
And the Prime Minister is receiving some pressure, from Conservative leader Andrew Scheer, who is encouraging him to reach out directly to Chinese President Xi Jinping in order to try to get some movement on this situation.
And the tension between China and Canada just keeps growing. So what does this mean, Catherine, for the long-term relationship between the 2 countries?
Yeah, I mean, up until recently, Canada was certainly trying to pursue closer trade ties with China. That is something that is certainly going to be damaged by this situation, no question. Of course, one of the big questions hanging over this is well, it's not a question, I think an assumption, it would be better to say, that this is tied to Canada's detention of the Huawei executive, Meng Wanzhou. That has caused a lot of tension between the 2 countries. And moving forward with a stronger trade relationship really does seem to be out of the question at this point when there are Canadians who are being detained. Here's what the infrastructure minister, François Champagne, had to say. He is the former trade minister. He weighed in on the issue today.
Well, the trading relationship will continue. You know, states, you cannot judge a trade relationship on a daily basis. This is over decades. The relationship will continue, things will happen, but like I said, our focus now is on the Canadians. But if you look at the trade relationship, they will continue. We have consular cases in probably every country of the planet, and we have trading relationships.
Now, it's not just affecting the relationship with China, it seems, but also Canada's relationship with the U.S. Canada has insisted, certainly when it comes to the case of Meng Wanzhou, that this is about a judicial process now, that politics has nothing to do with it. And the other day, U.S. President Donald Trump weighed in saying, well, essentially politicizing the situation and saying he'd be willing to trade Ms. Meng if it meant a new trade deal with China. And according to reporting by my colleagues Catherine Tunney and Katie Simpson, one senior source is saying that this has created a new level of frustration amongst Canadian officials with Donald Trump, certainly injecting an element of politics into all of this, which is something, it seems from the comments from Chinese officials, they have believed all along, that this is a politicized process and one where Canada could ultimately just decide to hand over Ms. Meng to the Chinese if Canadian officials saw that fit.
Catherine, thank you. The CBC's Catherine Cullen live in Ottawa. So there's a lot to keep track of in this story, and here's a reminder of how it has unfolded over the past couple of weeks. The CFO of Huawei, Meng Wanzhou, was arrested in Vancouver on December 1st. The U.S. wants her extradited over allegations she violated American sanctions on Iran. On December 11th, Ottawa confirmed ex-Canadian diplomat Michael Kovrig is being detained in China, but it did not say why. Also on the 11th, Meng Wanzhou is granted bail after a 3-day hearing. And then today, China confirmed it is holding Kovrig as well as a second Canadian entrepreneur Michael Spavor. They're being detained on suspicion of endangering national security. We're getting some insight now into what the two Canadians may be going through. Peter Dahlin is a Swedish human rights worker who disappeared in China in 2016. He spoke with us from Madrid.
I was, I guess, sort of expecting it, and I've had, at that point, several colleagues who had already been disappeared into this particular system over the preceding month. But once it happened to me, of course, you're in a bit of a state of shock. The key thing really is, and I think this is about to happen or have happened to both of the Michaels here, is that they've been placed into something called RSDL, Residential Surveillance at a Designated Location. So they are not detained or arrested, they are kept outside, to some extent, of the judicial system in solitary confinement in special custom-built secret prisons. And I was in just one such prison.
And what was that prison like?
Well, you're in solitary confinement, with guards watching you 24 hours a day, taking note on any movement you do, inside a suicide-padded cell. Within this system, they will deny contact with family, with lawyers. They will not release your whereabouts, so you're in a state of enforced disappearance. So you go from extreme boredom that comes with sitting in a suicide-padded cell where every minute feels like an hour, to then having at least one interrogation session per day, and each session will last 5 to 6 hours.
That sounds like a long time. What kind of questions do they ask you for 5 or 6 hours every day?
They go over everything. This is the Ministry of State Security. This is not the police. So it signifies sort of a higher level of investigation. As I said, you do one, sometimes 2 sessions a day, and they tend to start late in the afternoon or in the evenings to make sure that they run into the night as one effective way of making sure that you're sleep deprived.
And do they ask the same questions over and over again?
Oh, many times. Of course, the same question will be repeated a few times every day. And for the official records, and this is the tricky one, they tend to rewrite your answers for you to fit their purpose. So you'll have to be very vigilant in how they record the notes from the session, or else it can be used against you in a court later on. As I actually just read Kevin and Julia Garrett's new book, who are also in RSDL up in Dandong, just like Michael Spevor is right now, and they notice this as well, that they will often intentionally misinterpret your words and try to use it against you at a later stage.
And that's Peter Dahlin talking with us from Madrid about his experiences while being detained by authorities in China. Earlier this week, U.S. President Donald Trump said he might intervene in the Meng case, but the Wall Street Journal is reporting his aides are warning him against that. It says advisors told him his options are limited and that the arrest and potential prosecution of Meng are out of his hands. One advisor reportedly told him it's a Justice Department matter and he should stay out of it. On Tuesday, Trump said he would be willing to intervene in the case if it would help secure a trade agreement with China.